Welcome back to What Do They Know podcast. The regular season is officially in the books. The guys will take a look back at some of their preseason predictions and break down all of the matchups for the wild card weekend. But hey, what do they know?
What do they know? Well, we are about to find out. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the What Do They Know podcast. Week 18 is officially in the books. The playoffs are here. Nick and Jeff back with you to wrap up the regular season. Had a lot of good action today. Lots of surprises.
Right. Especially considering what we had, I guess, predicted initially.
Yeah.
Obviously,
which we'll get into all that.
Right. Nothing ever goes according to plan.
Yeah. What do they know? It's the title of this show for a reason.
Exactly.
So we'll get into all the playoff action and recap some of our predictions at the beginning of the season, but we'll just go over some top stories each of us have. Just to kick it off. For me personally, I'll start, and it's just kind of a two-part top story with two different teams, and it's Jacksonville and Philadelphia for me, and just the collapses that they both have had. Obviously, Philadelphia is still in the playoffs,
right?
But that's not you can't say that they didn't try their hardest to really blow that,
right?
When you look at both of those teams, I mean, Jacksonville, they started the season 8-3, in total control by at least for what it seemed. And they ended up finishing 9-8. So that's 1-5 in their last 6 games.
Yeah, that one win was against the Panthers.
Correct.
So.
Yep. And the same can be said for Philly. I mean, it's even worse for Philly. They were 10-1, and they ended up 11-6.
Right.
So, I mean, to go to start the season 10-1 and to win one of your last 5 games. Granted, they were against some decent opponents, but you could argue that they should have also lost to the Giants on Christmas and gone 0-6.
Yeah, this is the definition of limping to the playoffs right now.
Doubt. No doubt.
This is a gunshot wound to the leg, both legs maybe.
No doubt.
Yeah, you're just crawling yourself in there.
I mean, they just look completely lost. They look like a total different team. They got crushed by the Giants today. They're arguably their top 2 offensive weapons both got injured. Jalen Hurts dislocated a finger on his throwing hand, which looked disgusting. It was going 3 different directions. And AJ Brown, thankfully it sounds like he's going to be okay, but that dang MetLife turf struck again.
Right.
He caught a pass and was trying to make a little cut and ended up fumbling the ball and just grabbing at his knee and writhing in pain. And I was like, man, you got to be kidding me! They're going to lose their best player right before the playoffs. And it's funny. I'll give one of my buddies a shout out, Joe Rogers. He listens to the show. He chimes in quite frequently. He's a diehard Philly fan, and I want to say it was Monday or Tuesday. He put out on social media he's like, you know what? I don't care about the seedings. I don't care about the division. Give me the 5 seed. Don't play anybody on that turf,
right?
Because I don't want anybody to get hurt. And that's exactly what happened today. He called it perfectly. Now, again, from everything we're reading, it sounds like AJ Brown is fine. There's no, the ACL was intact. There's no damage. So it sounds like he has a shot to play next week.
Right.
But that could have been, catastrophic.
Right. It would be the nail in the coffin for the Eagles, you would feel
I don't know how much more the league needs to replace that field. It's so sad when you consider that they did that at the beginning of the season to supposed, better turf. And I mean, we've detailed it at length on this show, but it just continues to be a story.
Oh, right. Yeah. And I mean, no offense to MetLife, but it feels like it's always MetLife.
Correct.
So obviously it's not the only field in the NFL with turf, but at the same time, it feels like that's where the majority of the complaints and the injuries are coming from. And it's scary to think that 2 teams play on that field as their home turf, when the Jets and the Giants.
Yeah.
That's 2 teams that could potentially lose a good bulk of their roster with injuries because of that stadium.
Not only that, but I think it's gotten to the point where you have to seriously consider, are you going to lose out on big name free agents that don't want to come there because they don't want to risk injury?
Right.
I think that's a realistic storyline because, I mean, you look at the guys that have gotten injured on that field this year. Aaron Rodgers, for one. I can't remember his name, but a big defensive end for the Dolphins also blew out his Achilles on that field against the Jets. I mean, it just goes on and on. So something's got to change there.
Right.
But yeah, man, I said it last week that I think that the Eagles are going to go one and done. And I am starting to believe that even more. I mean, they play Tampa Bay next week. We'll get into that in a bit. But I have zero confidence in them to win next week. Go on the road to Tampa Bay, who even though they won 9-0 today, they still are on fire, all things considered.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think that the Bucs have a chance to pull that off.
Right. To be honest with you, I have zero confidence in either of those teams. So I honestly wouldn't be surprised if it goes either way. But yeah, the Bucs are landing with the Eagles at the right time for them.
Yep, no doubt.
Yep.
All right, what do you got?
So for me, this is the time for reminiscing, right? The end of the season and whatnot. So my top story was still injuries. Sam Laporta got injured today.
Yep.
He got carted off. Apparently, it's a hyperextended knee. And it just continues on and on with the theme of the injuries. Obviously, we're as the show unfolds, we're going to go into playoff predictions and what we got right, what we got wrong. And I just want to name some of the injuries of teams I had in the playoffs that didn't make it to the playoffs. So the Bengals, they lost Joe Burrow, or he was injured at least throughout the course of the season. The Colts, Anthony Richardson, how would they have looked? Would he have, I guess, gone through that growth curve that C.J. Stroud did during the middle of the year? The Jets with Aaron Rodgers, obviously. And then I guess this isn't so bad, but the Browns with Deshaun Watson. I'm wondering. Yeah. It looks like
the best thing that's ever happened.
Exactly. It looks like it's working out for them.
Which that's going to be a story for next season.
Right.
Just what they do and how bad his contract is and all that. But it could. Who knows?
Yeah. Though I would be curious how Deshaun Watson would be looking fully healthy.
Yeah.
That whole Brown system. So it's just one of those things where obviously injuries always take a toll, but at this point, we can't predict injuries, obviously, but injuries are just one of those things where it just takes up the headlines whenever they do happen. And so thankfully playoffs are here. So this is where it all means, and it's not wasted on a week 18 meaningless game like the AJ Brown at MetLife Stadium in a week 18 game where nothing really transpired. Would have happened if they would have won it anyway, seeing as the Cowboys beat the Commanders pretty handily.
Yeah, they did.
So, that was my top story.
Yeah, man. I think I read something this week, and I'm going to butcher this stat because I didn't plan on talking about it, but this season is the second most total quarterbacks that have started or been played in games ever. You think about the Browns had 5 quarterbacks. The Jets have started 3 or 4 quarterbacks. There have just been quarterbacks all over the place.
Vikings,
yeah. Bengals, I mean, they only had 2. I'm trying to think. There's more than that.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure if you scan throughout the list.
Cardinals, I think, started 2 or 3 different guys.
Dobbs, and then whoever they had in between Kyler Murray and Dobbs. Yep.
Yeah, so there's just been quarterbacks all over the place. And that's just one position. So injuries have been through the roof this year, like you said.
Right, absolutely. I feel like this elevates, I guess, the value of a backup quarterback. I feel like that's kind of like an afterthought sometimes. But man, it just seems to be like those teams that actually had a backup quarterback installed in place really thrived. And I mean, you can even be like the Browns and sign somebody off the street like Joe Flacco and hit the lottery on that regard. But I mean, it'll be interesting for me to see what I guess the value becomes of backup quarterbacks going into next year, especially like Gardner Minshew or something like that.
Yep. So one more thing I want to talk about, I want to throw in here. It's kind of comedic. We've talked on this show about how, specifically with me, like when it's football season, it's all consuming to me. Like it's pretty, admittedly, and I'm not proud of this, but it's pretty much all I think about for 18 straight weeks. Different matchups, who the Jets play, fantasy football, just everything. And so obviously week 18, the Jets are done. This is where I start to like wind down and think about other things. I transition to, college basketball, and I get ready for spring training. And so my mind starts to go elsewhere. But I'm just going to give you a quick example of how bad it is. Okay. So I texted you about this briefly today. So my daughter was playing in the playroom yesterday. I was in the kitchen doing something, and something happened to where she decided she needed to go in a full sprint to the kitchen, and she ate it, and she ate it hard. Right. And so I go running over to her because she's crying, and she grabs her knee. You want to know what my first thought was? She tore her ACL. I'm not even kidding you. In my head, I go, she just tore her ACL. And then I'm quickly like, you moron. Like, she's not playing football. She's just a 2-year-old in a playroom, which she ended up just skinning her knee. But like, that's so sad that like my daughter gets injured, and immediately I'm like, that's a football injury. She just tore ACL.
Who'd you try to juke?
That's a 12-month recovery. Like literally in the 30 seconds from it, she fell to me to go getting her. Like I'm like, oh man, I saw her grab her knee. I'm like, oh, it's ACL.
It's ACL.
And she just tore it when it was just a skinned up knee.
Bring out the cart.
Yep. Like that. I feel like that is just so sad on my part that like that's where my mind goes.
See, anytime I see somebody grab their lower half of their body, like their legs area. For me, for whatever reason, I always find the joke turf toe. Like, hilarious.
Yeah.
Turf toe. Turf toe.
3-week injury.
3-week injuries. So, like, I understand that completely. I always go to turf toe regardless of what it is. But yeah, seeing as an ACL on your 2-year-old. Yeah, that's a little fascinating.
I just thought that was so sad. I had that moment where I like had to step back and I'm like, really, dude?
Right.
Like, that's what you think? Your daughter just tore her ACL? So, needless to say, my mind will start digressing from football, and I'll start thinking about other things. But I just thought that was
that's a perfect
kind of hilarious on my part.
That's a perfect
because we've talked about that. But all right, so we did our top stories. We are each going to do kind of a season in review, real quick. Not anything crazy in depth, but just recapping the seasons of our teams.
Right.
So I'll let you kick it off with your Saints.
Yeah, this is I guess a final chance for us to rant or just compliment if we have any compliments for any of the coaching staff or the players.
Yep.
Obviously I have my gear. You chose not to have your gear. Obviously this is the last week, I guess, of the season that I can wear any of their gear.
Yeah, we've talked about that too. No more Jets gear after today.
No more Saints gear after this. So, and obviously I have my Coyotes.
I should have wore something now that I'm thinking about it.
It's
my last chance.
I know. I told you. But it is what it is. Obviously, this is the past. This is the future right here with the hockey. This is my
See, for me, it's college basketball.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I've been growing out of college sports for a little bit. I don't know why.
Really?
I just haven't had the time to watch it.
Right now is where I start getting excited for March Madness and Syracuse basketball and all that stuff.
Right.
Anyways, proceed.
Right. Perfect. All right. Well, but yeah. Oh, yeah. I got to show these off.
Oh, and the Saints socks.
That's right.
For those watching on YouTube, you just got a great view of Jeff's foot.
Absolutely.
Wow, what a catch that was.
Who was that?
That was an amazing catch.
I don't even know who that is.
Trent Sherfield, I think.
Look at you pulling out that name.
I know. I told you, dude. All-consuming. Trent
Sherfield coming out.
Bills just tied it up on a phenomenal tipped pass that was caught in the back of the end zone, so it looks like it's going to be 7-7.
Right. Let's see if he kept his feet in bounds.
1-2.
Yeah, he's in.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. So getting back to the Saints, I guess they finished 9-8.
Yep. They finished hot.
Here, I'll read you Derek Carr's last 4 games of the season.
Yep.
96 for 128, so that's a 75% completion percentage. 998 yards, 12 TDs, 1 interception.
Yep.
And a 125 passer rating.
Yep.
That's pretty good.
It is very good.
And I feel, but see, the thing is, what worries me about
Carmichael.
Pete Carmichael.
They're going to keep him around.
Well, now you mention it, I guess that's 2 things that worry me. I feel like Derek Carr has, I guess, a history of showing these spurts that makes you believe in him. Yep. That's like, 100%. All right, he's learned the offense, he's turning the corner, we're going to go in next year, and everything's going to be smooth sailing. And then all of a sudden, everything just derails somehow, some way. So this worries me. Obviously, I wished these stats were
all year
consistent throughout the year, but Pete Carmichael, obviously, I don't know what's going to
figure it out.
Right, exactly. And now, do you give him another year? I lean towards no, and there's a reason for that. I want a clean house because, and here's something interesting that happened during today's game. I don't know if you heard about this, but during the final drive of the game for the Saints, they're at the 1-yard line of Atlanta's. It was 41-17. It's a blowout. It's 1:40 left in the clock, and they gave Jamal Williams the ball to get a touchdown, even though they were already in victory formation.
See, I didn't know they were in victory formation.
They were in victory formation.
Oh, see, I didn't know that.
Yep.
I knew they scored with little time left, and Arthur Smith was pissed.
Yep.
But I didn't know that they were in victory for that. I think that's bad.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So here's the thing. Dennis Allen called the victory formation, and Jameis Winston came over and asked him if they can run a play for Jamal Williams to get his first touchdown of the year. And Dennis Allen told him no. So he told him to do the victory formation. So they did, but they ran a play anyway for Jamal Williams. So they
no kidding.
Yep. So they basically ran a play under the players came together in that huddle and decided to give it to Jamal Williams. So they overruled.
That is terrible.
Excuse me. They overruled their head coach.
I didn't know that.
Yep. So that's where I guess
that's not. You lost the team.
Yep.
When
exactly.
the minute they do that, they don't respect you, and you've lost them.
Yep.
That to me is the biggest indicator right there that they need to clean house.
Exactly.
That's crazy. I did not know that.
Yep. So that was a whole thing.
It's funny because it's funny you say that. It makes more sense because Arthur Smith, when they met at midfield, he was he was animated. He was like getting in Dennis Allen's face, and you could kind of see like Dennis Allen was like, "Whoa, dude, like calm down." Like,
yeah, I know,
which makes more sense now because he's like, "Hey, man, like
He said, "I understand."
Yeah,
he said, like I can hear him say, "I understand," and now I know why he understood because he didn't approve of that play to be ran.
Right.
So that's why I'd rather clean house because obviously the players are at the same time. Jameis Winston, obviously he was a starter last year and then he got injured and then he never got his job back. Obviously Dennis Allen was the head coach. You'd wonder how much animosity there is between Jameis Winston and Dennis Allen. But at the same time, if the players are picking Jameis Winston over you as the head coach, I think it's done.
Yeah,
that's basically says it all. And I'd be interested to see how that happens. Obviously, last week I told you about how Dennis Allen. There was a report Dennis Allen was going to keep his job.
Yep.
Now I'm wondering if that's going to be thought over again. So that's basically the season review right there. That sums up everything the Saints had happened. They didn't have the tough schedule. They had probably maybe a bottom 3 easy schedule, and they finished 9-8. That's to me is unacceptable.
Yeah.
Especially in that division where 10-7 would have gotten you the division and a home playoff game. So obviously I'm a fan through and through. I got the gear. I watched the games, but at the same time, you personally as a fan, you want what's best for the team as well. So that's where I'm at. I hope to clean house, but even if they don't, I'd put Dennis on a very short leash.
Yeah,
next year.
Yeah,
but that's for me.
Okay,
that's it for me.
Interesting. That makes me perplexed.
Right
for the Saints.
Right.
All right. So for the Jets, obviously, I mean, their season was pretty much over 4 plays into the season, with Rodgers blowing out his Achilles. I mean, I think the biggest thing that this season showed was kind of how the GM dropped the ball on getting a backup quarterback and doing nothing to salvage or change their offensive line.
Right.
Because even it doesn't, in my opinion, I don't care who was back there. Rodgers, Joe Montana, it doesn't matter. Like that offensive line was terrible all year. All year they were terrible. They had like 14 different combinations all year. 14 out of 18 weeks, they had different linemen starting different positions, shuffling people all over the place. You can't win like that. Right. They just said before we turned this game on, the volume on this game, that the Bills have had the same offensive and defensive line every single week. That's continuity, right? Obviously, there's always going to be injuries, but like the Jets' situation, offensive line was just terrible.
Right. It's obviously you say there's always injuries, and obviously yes, but it's the GM's job to have someone place that makes that transition a little more seamless than what it is. And when you go through combinations like the Jets have, obviously shuffling people all around, seeing what their best fit is, I feel like at that point it kind of goes on the coaching as well, because isn't this the sort of thing that you were supposed to figure out during preseason and training camp? Like if this happens, 100%. We're going to put this person there and yada yada.
Which Saleh has taken ownership of the fact that like they had no backup plan for Rodgers. Like they never accounted for it. They sold their souls basically for Rodgers this season, and it all went down in flames. And so I think that they ended the season at least offensively better than they started. I mean, they were historically bad for like 10 weeks.
Right.
I thought it was interesting. Nathaniel Hackett said this week in like his end of the season press conference that he himself as an offensive coordinator was not prepared for how much of an asset Breece Hall was going to be in the passing game, which I thought was really interesting. Like he just didn't plan for him to be as dominant as he was. I mean, he had his last 4 or 5 weeks. He just was off the charts. Multiple touchdowns almost every game. He had 175 rushing yards today. Another touchdown. He came up 6 yards short of 1,000 yards, which just sucks for him.
But right. And he missed how long before he came back?
He missed. So he played every game this year.
Did he?
He came off ACL.
Right. That's why I was wondering.
Yep, no, he played every game.
Some time.
He played every game this year.
We saw glimpses of what he could do before he got injured.
No doubt. So I think for them in the offseason, there's a couple things. They need a number 2 wide receiver. Corey Davis kind of up and retiring randomly right before the season kind of, didn't help.
Right.
They the Allen Lazard signing was a complete bust.
Mm-hmm.
Now he could look completely different next year with Rodgers because that's the whole reason they brought him over.
Right.
So who knows? But wide receiver, offensive line's their top priority, and a backup quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things that they need to address. They're drafting 10th, so they should be able to at least get one of those things. I would think, whether it's an offensive lineman or something.
I feel like offensive lineman is usually the way to go around the I guess 7 to 13 range, because obviously the top picks are the flashy picks, which is like the quarterbacks and wide receivers, and then the top offensive tackle or whatever will probably be up there in the top 6, but you'll get number 2 or number 3 around that time frame of 10th overall pick.
They're running it back with Saleh and Joe Douglas, which
they
are. Yep. The owner came out actually like 2 or 3 weeks ago and said that they're basically completely writing this season off and redoing it next year.
That's
which
rough.
I think if it was any other team that didn't have a guy like Aaron Rodgers, they would be gone.
Right.
So I'm curious they went all in this season. I think they're going to go even more all in next season, which I've heard they're going to go after, obviously, Devontae Adams, T. Higgins, Mike Evans to be like that number 1 or number 2 guy with Garrett Wilson. So who knows? I think it's going to be a fun offseason at the same time. I'm officially done getting my hopes up ever for the Jets. I just don't think that it's physically possible to get any more disappointed with this team. So I'll, whatever happens.
Right.
That's
yeah. It's just one of those things where I hope they do learn their lessons from this season, because at this point next year, knock on wood, if Rodgers, something happens to Rodgers again, are they going to have a plan in place, or they're going to write off another year? Like, Trey telling that to the fans, we're just writing it off. Don't worry.
Yeah.
So it's a weird look. It's the same thing with like the Saints. Like, you write off the year because it's Derek Carr's first year there. Some hiccups. So obviously Olave had some cop trouble, some legal issues when he got pulled over for I think a DUI or something. Michael Thomas was throwing bricks at people or cars or something like that. It's just one of those things where there was drama off the field, but at the same time, don't write it off. Right. You're supposed to maintain control and respect inside that locker room. And obviously Dennis Allen hasn't. I'm not sure how Saleh is in the locker room with the Jets or how the perception is there. But
they played hard.
Right.
Every single game they played hard.
Oh, remember what Robert Saleh during Hard Knocks?
Yeah.
Yeah. You fell into the trap.
How can you not? Hey, your team played hard.
Yeah.
That was one thing that Saleh does not like to hear.
Yep.
But you know what, buddy? That's what happens. That's what happens when you lose.
Yep.
So,
all right.
So that's we're 2 pathetic guys who our teams didn't make the playoffs. So we'll see.
We're looking forward to next year.
We'll see what happens next year. Yep.
Right.
All right, let's jump into teams that actually did something this season, and that's our playoff teams. So for all intents purposes, the playoffs are set. We know all the teams, and we know 4 out of the 6 matchups. The last 2 will be decided with this game going right now. So of the matchups that are decided, I'm just going to go over them. We got Philly at Tampa Bay.
Okay.
Which they played in week 3, and Philly beat them 25-11, which I don't know that that's even important at this point, because Philadelphia is a completely different team than they are now.
They had a different mojo back then.
And you could argue that Tampa is as well. So I don't know that matchup necessarily means anything.
I'd argue more for Philadelphia being a different team, because their juju was a lot stronger back then. Yeah. Tampa Bay has been inconsistent all year, I feel.
And then we got the Rams going to Detroit. which that's my game of the weekend. Just Matthew Stafford going back to his own team, his old team, I should say. I don't think he's played them since he got traded. And it's going to be in Detroit. So I think it's going to be interesting because if it wasn't a playoff game, it would be like a tremendous atmosphere. They'd be giving them a huge ovation, and maybe they still will.
Right.
But it's going to be different because it's a playoff game, and it's Detroit hosting a playoff game for the first time in a very long time.
Right.
So I am really curious about that game. And then so we got Packers at the Cowboys, which Mike McCarthy versus his old team. And then the last one that is set is Cleveland at Houston. And they just played week 16 and Cleveland pretty much crushed them 36-22. And it wasn't even that close, honestly. So the other possibilities, I'll just kind of go over them and hopefully I won't confuse people. Obviously the Bills and the Dolphins are playing right now. They're tied at 7. If the Bills win, they get the 2 seed.
Right.
And they'll host the Steelers.
Okay.
Which would mean the Dolphins they'll get the 6 seed and they'll go to Kansas City. If the Dolphins win, they get the 2 seed. The Bills fall all the way down to 7, and it's a rematch. Bills at Dolphins next week.
In Miami
again.
Right.
So that would mean that the Steelers would go to the Chiefs.
Okay.
Play at the Chiefs. So those are the only other options. So what jumps out at you with all these games?
So I want to go back and I guess look back at my Chiefs prediction of being 1 and done. Yeah. So I'm looking at these potential matchups against the Steelers and Dolphins. Obviously, if you're the Chiefs, you'd rather play the Steelers than the Dolphins.
No doubt.
To be honest with you.
No doubt.
Offensively, you have what it takes to beat the Steelers, but offensively, I don't think you have what it takes to keep up with the Dolphins. So that's where I'm looking at.
Yeah.
I still, honestly, I'd probably still pick the Steelers over the Chiefs just in that upset fashion.
You know what's crazy is I still can't help but think that, okay, the regular season is over. They got in. It's a game at Arrowhead. They're just going to flip the switch and it's going to be a completely different team. I know that's foolish considering we had an 18-week sample size.
Right.
But how many times did we see the Patriots limp into the playoffs and underperform and then go on a run and win the Super Bowl? How many times I could think of multiple seasons where the storyline midway through was that they're done and they end up winning the Super Bowl.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I just, for me, and I think I've said it on the show before, I am not going to believe that the Chiefs are done until they the clock strikes 0 and they lost.
I feel like we as people, we see a successful franchise and we kind of maybe I don't want to say root because I feel like
you gravitate to them.
Right.
Yeah.
And you kind of want them to lose because you want to see a little bit of a difference in future matchups. I want to see something else. Yep. I guess it's more like attention span.
Yeah. They're the villain. They always say that sports are best when you have a villain to root for. And I feel like the Chiefs
as of
have
right now
kind of become that villain because they've been good every year.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. So, I mean, you got Patrick Mahomes and I guess not a lot of people are a fan of his brother and whatnot.
I've heard it. Yeah. I don't know much about him. I've heard he's a tool.
Right. And then obviously Travis Kelce making headlines by dating Taylor Swift. So there's all sorts of headlines there with the Kansas City Chiefs that kind of just rub you the wrong way, even though it's not their fault really.
Yep.
So, but at the same time, they're so successful in winning a Super Bowl 1 or 2.
They've won 2. They've been
right?
3
They've been
years in a row.
Right. Yep.
They won 2 of them.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's just the thing where it's like, all right, let's have somebody else put in there. And it happened with the Patriots. But for me, obviously, I'd pick the Dolphins over the Chiefs. The Steelers, I'd be reluctant, but maybe I'd do it.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Packers and Cowboys. I'm scared for the Packers on that one.
Yeah, me
to be honest with you.
Me too.
Rams and Lions, like you said, it should be an interesting matchup.
I think the thing with the Packers and Cowboys, maybe not necessarily with the matchup, but the fact that the Packers made it is the fact that I think they literally have done it again by finding a franchise quarterback.
Jordan Love.
I think he's a stud. I think he's the real deal. I'm all in on him. So it makes me infuriated as a Jets fan, where they have drafted 1,000 quarterbacks in my lifetime, and all of them have been terrible except Mark Sanchez.
Ooh.
AKA Sanchez.
That's a hot take right there. Not a lot of people
I love Mark Sanchez.
I don't think he was bad.
I will watch playoff clips of Mark Sanchez all day.
He was very competent.
He's my guy.
Yeah, he was competent.
Shout out Mark Sanchez.
But
he's been the only one that you could call a mild success.
Mm-hmm.
And the Packers literally for the last 40 years, give or take, have had 3 quarterbacks.
Right.
It's ridiculous. And it infuriates me. But good for them.
Yeah, but I've talked about this before on the show as well. The formula about drafting a QB and then having them sit for a little while, letting them learn the process of being a professional in the NFL. Obviously, they had Brett Favre, and then they had Aaron Rodgers for a couple of years before he took over, and then Jordan Love. He's
3, I think, 3 or 4 years, like a good amount of time.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then now Jordan Love, same exact situation. They're in no rush.
They do it perfectly.
Right.
You can say what you want about them.
Right.
But the two things that I feel like they are phenomenal at is identifying and drafting quarterbacks. Now, obviously, I think they traded for Favre, so
from Atlanta,
right. But quarterbacks and drafting no-name guys or signing no-name guys at wide receiver and having them turn into studs.
Development.
Now, that could be a product of the quarterback, but you can always, I feel like the Packers, you can always rely on a good quarterback and wide receivers who you may have never heard of, but they're good.
Right. Yep. Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs.
I mean, think about nowhere. Nobody knew who Greg Jennings or Jordy Nelson was until they got to the Packers.
Yeah, I mean, this was always the case with Aaron Rodgers never getting a first-round pick and
correct
for help.
They didn't need it.
Yeah, exactly.
They didn't. I don't think they needed it.
They had other needs.
Yeah.
So the Packers are very successful at doing what they do. But at the same time, they have a formula that works for them. Obviously, with other franchises like the Jets, you put in a rookie QB and maybe you panic or maybe you hold on too long and all of a sudden they're not developing as they should. So kudos to the Packers, man. Jordan Love, going into the season, I thought we would struggle a little bit in the beginning of the season, which he did, and then he picked it up during the end of the year. So and he has. So he's shown his colors there in Green Bay. So good for him.
Yeah, and the team that we haven't talked about at all yet, which is probably this, in my opinion, the story of the playoffs, is the Houston Texans.
Oh yeah,
dude. I mean, they were picked by everybody, including both of us, to finish dead last. I think their over/under on wins, we've talked about it, was like 3.5 or maybe 4.5. So they were slated, 3 or 4 wins max, and they ended up winning 10 games and winning the division. 9 games? 10 games?
They went 10-7.
10-7.
10-7.
So they won 10 games with a rookie head coach and a rookie quarterback. Only 5 teams have ever done that.
Right.
And made the playoffs. And you could say that Jacksonville gave it away, but I also think that I think it's a combination of both. I think that Jacksonville gave it away, but I also think Houston went and took it.
Right.
Because they got some studs. There were a couple, I don't know if you watched the game last night. We didn't talk about it, but there were a couple throws that Stroud made that were just like, wow.
Yep.
Wow.
Honestly, I saw that 75-yard touchdown to Nico Collins, and I thought he reminded me like a prime Drew Brees on that one. I was like the stance and the form. I was like that's a deep ball right there. Yeah. That was beyond accurate to me. That was a really good ball. Obviously going into the season, Bryce Young was the number 1 overall pick, so CJ Stroud kind of got overlooked, I guess.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, Bryce Young kind of got all the love for the offseason, but CJ Stroud didn't pay mind to it at all, obviously.
At all.
So yeah.
And I mean, they're so far ahead of schedule.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they're doing this the last 4 or 5 weeks without their stud receiver Tank Dell.
Right.
I mean, you got your cornerstone defensive guy Will Anderson. You got your quarterback for the next 10 years, and it looks like you have your number 1 wide receiver in Tank Dell, along with other guys who are showing up like Nico Collins. You got Dalton Schultz. Got a 2-headed monster in the backfield with Dameon Pierce and Devin Singletary. I mean, if you're a Texans fan, you got to be just over the moon.
Right.
Like,
I mean, obviously going into the season, we were like, this is division this is Jags division to take.
Yep.
It's going into next year. This is the Texans.
It's 1,000% the Texans.
Yep. So obviously the Jaguars are going to have their own questions to face over the offseason, but the Texans, things are looking very bright there in Houston.
No doubt.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So at the beginning of the season, if you guys have been with us since week 1 or even before week 1, the preseason,
our divisional breakdowns.
We went through every division. We made our playoff predictions, talked about what we were looking for. So we're going to kind of just recap those and talk about, what we got wrong or what we got right as best we can. Obviously, we're not going to go through every single detail, but so I went and I tallied up how many division winners we each got right and how many total playoff teams we each got right.
Okay.
So I'll go through those really quick. And obviously division winners, the East is to be determined. So we left those out.
Right.
We both picked the Bills.
Right.
So we'll see.
Add one if
add one. Correct.
Right.
Yeah. So Jeff, he got Detroit and the Chiefs. So he got 2 division winners. You got 2. I picked the Chiefs. I picked the Ravens, and then I picked the 49ers. So I got 3. Now, obviously, if the Bills win, you'd get 3 and I would get 4.
Right.
Total playoff teams, we each had 7. So you had the Chiefs, Bills, Browns, Eagles, Lions, 49ers, and Dallas.
Okay.
The ones that I had in there that were separated on, I didn't have the Browns. You didn't have the Ravens.
I showed you before the show. I had them originally, but then I scratched them out for the Chargers.
I did not have Dallas,
right?
And you did not have the Dolphins. So we each had a couple that the other did not. So we each had 7. We each got 7 total playoff teams correct. So 7 out of 14. So that's 50%. I mean, if this was baseball, we'd be in good shape. But it's not.
Thank you. Way to spin that positively.
Thank you. I appreciate it. But it's not. Right. So I would say that 50% is not terrific. Although it happens every year. It happens every year. The NFL does not ever go like it's planned.
Right.
So those are the teams that we got right. And so I thought it would be fun if I called it, best take, worst take. So we each pick our best take going into the season and obviously our worst one.
Right.
So how about we each do our best take?
Okay.
So go ahead.
All right. So my best take was probably the Lions and the Browns. Both those teams playing to the level that they ended up playing at this year. Obviously, I had Detroit winning the division. I thought going into the season there was too many question marks surrounding the other teams in the NFC North, so they were my easy pick, I guess, on that one. And then the AFC North with the Browns. Obviously, it was more of a surprise pick. I honestly did not know where to lean.
Yeah.
During the AFC North, so I felt spicy and went with the Browns. It felt spicy. So I went with the Browns, just like I ended up going with the Seahawks in the NFC West. Should have played it safe and went with the 49ers.
By that one.
I was trying to.
There was one episode, and I meant to go back and look at it, where we just completely disagreed, and I can't remember what it was, but my dad commented on it and said Jeff's going to end up being right, and I don't remember what it was.
Wasn't it the NFC South? I feel like because he thought,
but we both picked the same in the NFC South.
I think it was because of the Bucks.
Oh well, then I was right.
Oh yeah. Yeah, on that one, but it could have been something else.
I don't remember. We'll have to go back and find it because I vividly remember him commenting and saying Jeff's going to end up being right.
I thought Atlanta was going to be better than the Bucks for sure.
Yeah.
So and that did not end up true. So we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
But yeah, the Browns being I guess as stout as they did, I felt like the Steelers were probably going to be lower there if Joe Burrow never got injured with the Bengals. I feel like things would have shaken up a lot more to how I would have predicted. Obviously, I had the Bengals making the playoffs. They just missed out at 9-8 with Burrow's injury. The Jets, I had originally making the playoffs. Obviously, they had an injury. And then the Chargers, their head coach is in an injury. So, so it's just one of those things where, I originally had the Ravens at the 7th seed, but then I scratched them up with the Chargers just for the entertainment value of the Jaguars for the Chargers again. Yeah, for that playoff rematch from last year.
Right.
So, but oh well, you win some, you lose some.
Yep. So my best take is really 2 different teams. The Bucks. While I didn't pick them to win the division, I was very avid that they were going to have a decent year and that Baker and Mike Evans were going to perform well.
Yep.
I felt really strongly about it.
Yeah, all year. I know how strongly you feel about it.
Obviously, they won the division. So that was a good one. But obviously, my best one so far is the Ravens. I was really high on the Ravens. I predicted them to win the Super Bowl. And they have the 1 seed in the AFC. They're the best record in football. At 13-4.
Right.
So
obviously you saw something in the Ravens that I did not. I did not envision them being as good as they are. 13-4, I would have had them like 11-6 or 10-7 or something like that. But 13-4 is a really good record. You obviously the Harbaugh pedigree there, knows how to win.
Yeah.
So kudos to you. I give props to you.
Appreciate
on that
it.
one. Yep.
All right. What was your worst take?
Well,
Which I feel like
speaking of the Ravens and the Bucks,
I feel like the worst take is harder to do than our best take because we had so many bad takes.
Which one to pick? Basically,
yeah.
Oh yeah. Speaking of the Ravens and the Bucks, that was basically my worst take. Is I had the Bucks in last place in that division.
Yes, you did.
I thought Atlanta was gonna at least be competent. They finished.
I'm gonna try and look real quick.
Okay, they were 7-10. Well, yeah, they were 7-10, but I thought Desmond Ridder would at least be there to be a serviceable QB. Baker Mayfield, I'm not a huge fan of Baker.
Baker's my boy.
Yeah, Baker's your boy. Baker is
my
not my boy. So, and then obviously with the Saints, they have all the talent in the world. It's just they could not put it together soon enough in the season to actually make a difference in the divisional race. And then the Ravens just missing the playoffs in general. Obviously that AFC North was going to be a tough division regardless. So I would not have been, I guess, tough to sell on the Ravens making the playoffs over the Bengals or the Browns or anything during the time. I just went with the Browns and then the Bengals because the Bengals had been to the Super Bowl and I didn't want to deny Joe Burrow his dues on that one. Lamar Jackson obviously has his moments, but I'm not as convinced about Lamar Jackson. Was convinced about Lamar Jackson preseason as I was about Joe Burrow. So that's where I stood with those two teams.
Okay.
Yep.
I can't find it.
Okay. Perfect. Never happened.
I can't find it.
Never happened.
I'll have to, maybe my dad will listen and he can tell us what it was. But so my worst take was kind of twofold. Mm-hmm. Not only the Giants being good, but just how high on the Giants I really was. Like if you remember, I mean, you can go back and listen to our NFC East breakdown. Like I gave you all the reasons that freaking Daniel Jones was going to take a big step this year. They traded for Darren Waller. You know, they made the playoffs last year. They're going to be even better this year. I just went on, and I really believed it. So much so, the second part of this is I had Dallas missing the playoffs. I had the Giants finishing ahead of Dallas, which looks completely foolish now that they are the best team in that division and locked up the second seed.
Mm-hmm.
He dropped it. Oh,
James Cook.
He always does that. So that was my worst take. I'm sure there are probably others that people can comment and tell us, hey, you said this and it was stupid.
Right. Just look at a video and you'll probably find something.
Yeah.
In terms of the Giants, we were both high on the Giants. I thought they had the better offseason between them and Dallas, so they kind of, I guess, narrowed the bridge there, the gap between those two teams. Yep. But Dallas, kudos to them. I mean, they had 13 wins last year or something like that. Something pretty grand. So they didn't do much during the offseason, but they did tread water in the offseason. So I guess it showed off because they
kudos to Mike McCarthy.
Yeah,
because he took a shot on himself, taking over the play calling.
Right,
and I mean it's paid off.
Right, over Helen Moore. Yep. So. Yep. Yeah, Mike McCarthy. It'll be interesting to see that play out. That's why it's so intriguing for the Packers.
Yeah.
Can they get Mike McCarthy fired again?
That'd be awesome. What a story.
What a story.
All right. So we are going to each pick a game. Normally, the last couple of weeks, we've been picking a game to kind of break down. Mm-hmm. We've pretty much already done that. So just flat out, which game are you most excited about?
Browns and Texans, to be honest with you.
Which, you know what's funny is that's probably the least excited game.
You are?
Yeah.
So,
I feel like that's going to be like the 1:00 game on Sunday. Like nobody watches it. Like,
which is fine. Yeah. I mean, to me, I look at the Eagles and the Bucks. They're both struggling teams. I feel like I can't predict anything from that matchup because I don't know which team is going to show up. To be honest with you, and then the Packers and the Cowboys. Honestly, I think the Cowboys might throttle the Packers. To be honest with you,
I agree.
I can't really.
That'll be you know what annoys me is that'll be a primetime game because it's the Cowboys
and the Packers,
and it's the Packers, and it's two of the NFL's favorite teams.
Yep.
So that'll be like one of the three primetime games, and it'll probably not be a good game.
Yeah, I hope it is. And I hope I'm not, I guess, Cowboys hater, but I prefer the Packers over the Cowboys for sure. So I'm kind of hoping the Packers, I guess, get the jump on the Cowboys on that one. That'll be fun to see. But the Browns and Texans, I feel like is going to be a very underrated, entertaining matchup with C.J. Stroud going into his first playoff game, his first career playoff game, and then the Browns, how they look with
can they continue?
Right, Joe Flacco and their in that defense. So that to me is going to be my most exciting game.
Mine, I already talked about it, is the Rams at Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
I just love the storyline of Matthew Stafford going back to Detroit. I also think that Detroit is a great story this year.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be their first home playoff game in a really long time.
Right.
And they can do it, man. I mean, do I think that they're going to come out of the NFC? No. But do I think that they can be in the NFC Championship game against the Niners? I absolutely do.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be no points.
Oh, they threw it short?
They just blew it.
Yep.
They blew it.
Way to go.
The Bills just really bad clock management at the end of the half. Cost themselves 3 points.
Way to go.
Really bad. So halftime, I'm a little surprised here. Miami's up 14-7.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see. And that was a big, big stop.
Oof.
Man, that was close.
Right.
So yeah, I love that game. I think it should be one of the 3 like 8 o'clock games.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's the storyline there is really juicy.
It should be.
Big question is, Sam Laporta sounds like he's not going to play.
Right. And that's too bad for the Lions.
It is. It really is. And we already talked about injuries, but that could significantly impact their game plan. He's a big weapon. He's a big part of their offense. So we'll see what happens there. But I at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a great game because both teams have great offenses and can pretty much move the ball at will.
Yeah, Detroit thankfully has the weapons to, I guess, I wouldn't say replace, but overcome. Yeah. Right. Laporta's injury, obviously, you have St. Brown. Jahmyr Gibbs taking a life of his own back there. Montgomery is still back there. So they have weapons there. It's just about outscoring the Rams offense because they have Puka Nacua, which is making a case for himself for Rookie of the Year. Yeah. Even though I think it's C.J. Stroud.
Man. I agree, but it's got to be Stroud.
Right. And then Cooper Kupp on the other side. So that's going to be an intriguing matchup. I agree with you. That's going to be a fascinating game.
Yep.
Overall.
Awesome. So we are going to wrap up by doing our formality at this point, just recapping our last week's picks.
Right.
We're not going to do any for the playoffs just partly because we don't know all the matchups yet, but
right.
So we each won 1-1. Let's go back and see who we picked. So I picked the Cowboys over the Commanders, which was my lock, and it certainly was. And then I picked the Cardinals over Seattle as my upset, which
almost happened.
It almost happened. They missed a field goal last second, ended up losing to Seattle. And then your lock, you picked the Lions over the Vikings, which was a good one. And then the Bears over the Packers, which
move on from Justin Fields.
How dare happen. Yeah. So total end of the season standings, I was 15-15.
Look at that, Mr. Consistent.
Stop. That's like saying that'll play when you hit a bad golf shot. That'll play, and you just topped it like 30 yards. Mr. Consistent.
50, hey, the theme of 500%, right?
Yeah. Hey,
look at that.
Look at you. I should be playing baseball.
Hall of Fame, here we come.
And then you finished at 19-11, so you got me by 4 games.
Okay. You want to go over the ESPN ones?
Not really.
Okay, I'll go over them.
Not really. Thanks.
So we were doing the ESPN, all the picks, all the games,
every game,
every
week.
Yep.
Which, admittedly, we both.
I missed 2.
I think I missed at least 1 or 2.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you missed 2 as well. So I mean, these aren't 100% accurate, but at the same time,
it's enough of a sample size,
right? Considering we both picked over 200 games.
Yeah.
So I overall throughout the season I went 163 and 106. I was in the top 87.3 percentile.
Okay,
look at that.
That's good.
And then Nick, you went 154 and 114, which is in the top 80.2 percentile.
All right.
So hey, that's a B.
Yeah,
that's a B. That's pretty good.
I'm always good with a B.
I'm always
good with a B.
That's right. So
awesome.
All right. I'll be telling that throughout the off season.
Okay. Well, that'll do it for this week. I'm excited for next week.
Sure
All right, stop, Siri. Siri's wanting to pipe in on our show,
right?
But yeah, we will be back next week to wrap up. I mean, we'll probably be sitting here during the last game of the week. I would imagine Sunday night, and just talking about all the matchups, everything that happened. Actually, technically, there's a Monday night game too next week. So there's 2 on Thursday, 2 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday, and then there's 1 game Monday night. Which obviously none of the times have been. Never mind.
Oh, look at that!
As we speak.
Oh,
okay. So here we go, folks. Browns at Texans, 4:30 on Saturday. Packers at Cowboys, 4:30 on Sunday. There it is, prime time. I told you.
Yep.
Sunday night, Rams at Lions, and then the Monday night game, which I am just very surprised about, the Eagles at the Bucks.
Mm-hmm.
So the combination of the Bills and Dolphins and Chiefs and Steelers will either be Saturday night at 8:00 or
and Chiefs are on Saturday night.
Oh yeah, you're right. The Chiefs. So whoever the Chiefs play Saturday night 8:00, which of course because it's the Chiefs.
It's the Chiefs.
Yeah, and then the Bills. So the Bills are at 1:00 regardless.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, because
so the Bills are at 1:00 regardless on Sunday.
Yep.
And the Chiefs are at 8:00 Saturday night.
Yep.
Cool. All right. I'm a little surprised by the Eagles and Bucks Monday night game.
Getting that solo primetime.
Correct. But whatever. Hey, what do they know?
What do they know?
All right, folks. That is our show. We will catch up with you next week and go over all of the wild card weekend action. Hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to What Did They Know podcast. Make sure to follow us on all of our social media outlets to see future episode details. And don't forget to send in any questions or topics that you want to see the guys discuss in their weekly episodes to come.